Throughout anime history, there was always a constant with Spokons. It didn't matter if it was baseball, basketball, ping pong, or even shogi. All of them had something in common, and is that all of the protagonists were always humans. There was never a reason for that not to be the case. After all of the sports were always practiced exclusively by humans. So it never makes sense making an anime or a manga that had different elements to that. That is, until one sport decided to give it a go. Throughout all of the widely spread sports in the world, there's only one that actively uses animals, and not only that, but they are even more important than the human itself. And that is horse racing.
Journalism, they're coming to the finish, and it is forever young. Celebrate Japan! They won the Breeders' Cup Classic.
Horse race is a very unique sport in which most of their aspects are very different to other sports. It doesn't matter how good the human is. If the horse is not good enough, that is not gonna matter. And it doesn't matter how good the horse is, if the jockey is not experienced enough, it most likely will not be able to win even a single race. And that, combined with sports related with horses being usually related with elite, it was a very difficult task. That is, until Psy Games decided to create Uma Musume Pretty Derby. Uma Musume had to pass throughout a lot of different eras to actually know what they wanted to make. From a pure comedy with high levels of fanservice to a more balanced story that still was lacking in a lot of different areas. Over the years, the Uma Musume franchise has brought over a dozen different pieces of media, all of them with very mixed levels of quality. Some of them were fantastic, others not so much. However, the franchise showcased that it was constantly improving, from a solid yet uneventful first season to a much improved sequel with extremely high peaks, yet also really inconsistent, passing from some other interesting pieces of media. It seems like Psy Games reached its sweet spot once they decided to create the beginning of a new era. But there was something more in the tank. In a very similar time frame with the global release of the Uma Musume Pre-Derby game, they decided to create the so far last piece of media of the franchise. A piece of media that might actually reshape the world of Spokons for years to come, with the name Uma Musume Cinderella Gray. Hello there. Cinderella Gray is one of those pieces of media which is completely impossible to explain if you do not know anything about it. How can you explain to someone that is just How can you explain to a newcomer or someone that is barely getting into Spokons that actually one of the best ones is about a sport that it doesn't even fully rely on humans? He would say like, what? You're crazy, you're bugging. But that's the way it is. Cinderella Gray was one of the two things that actually made me interested in the franchise alongside the movie. Of course, I also watched the pre-derby seasons, but I was mainly interested in this part. And when I watched the others, I was extremely surprised as to how good the quality was. Granted, not everything was great, but the highs of the show were ones that I was not anticipating at all. And it was a fantastic experience. Then I watched the other parts of the story, the OVA, the special, and the movie, and every single one of them was good. No, not the special, sorry, cut that off. Both the OVA and the movie were extremely good, and it made me be really hyped for this season. And what can I say that is not, oh my god, what a fantastic season. This is amazing. Something that happened to me is that every single season I went with certain expectations and it somehow managed to surpass them, and this was by no means the exception. I knew from the get-go what the story was gonna be about. It was gonna be another one of those cases of you should surpass your own limits and become the best version of yourself. Pretty similar to the first season of the anime. However, this one was completely completely different to that. It was not just an surpass your own limits, this was an actual try to even be able to reach a limit in the first place to be surpassed. Unlike every other season that starts in the Trace Academy already, this one was from the lowest point that we have seen any horse start. The protagonist starts in a local high school that, granted, is a very good one for its own district or state, I don't know exactly what it is, but it's still just a local one and it's not the complete Japan-wide that is Trace Academy. So we see for the first time a protagonist actually starting from the lowest lows. So unlike any other season in which basically every protagonist is either an established horse already or just needs like a couple races in order for them to finally be along the best of the best, she has to start from actually the bottom of the barrel. Before even setting a foot in a greater race, which is not even the high tier, just the base ones, she already had double-digit races, which is absolutely insane when you consider that every other girl had like only 4 races to finally reach a grade 1. Not even a grade 3, which is the bottom of the graded, but rather a full-on grade 1. So her path was so much more difficult. And the 2-batch season always shows you that and never tries to hide it, despite never using it as an excuse. Her career was rougher than anyone else's, and it's very clear, and she tries to fight against that every single time. However, the protagonist is not weak at all, is one of the strongest protagonists, if not maybe the actually strongest. So what does make her special compared to the others, if I'm just talking about her path? That should not be a concern when we are talking about strictly talent, right? So why this season might be actually the best and not the others? Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. But the first that I want to talk is the secondary characters. Now, the secondary characters have always been a strong point in this show. From the always supportive and interesting trainer to other really interesting Umas like Silent Suzuka, like what would be Gold Ship, like what would be others like Mejiro McQueen or Rai Shower, to some others that are even more highly regarded, like what would be something like TM Opera O or even Agnes Tachyon. But what makes Cinderella Gray stand out is that it has the by far best cast of secondary characters, and that is not even close. Every single character fulfills an important role, from Yoki Tahara being the first actual trainer of the protagonist, to all of the secondary rivals, and all of them show really high levels of depth for what it is at the end of the day a secondary rival. Then you have to also take into consideration some other really high quality characters, like what are some of the more interesting, like Fujimasa March, which is basically the main rival of the first half of the first batch of the show. But in the second half of the show, or mostly the last 2/3, is where you can find the actual high level characters. All of the secondary rivals like Dista Striker, like Super Creek, or even others like the Wild Joker that is Obey Your Master. All of them show so good quality of writing in what is very little time for them to actually shine. Outside of Obey Your Master, none of the others have even half of a singular chapter of development, yet they are fantastic. And as I'm saying, Obey Your Master is just a phenomenal secondary rival, and it portrays so good something very important. But the first thing that I want to do is talk about the 2 main secondary characters. Yeah, that is a thing, don't question anything of what I just said. The first one is the supporting role of Belno Light. Now, this is the only time that we have seen an Uma being an actual supporter character entirely from the stands and not actually being a competitor. Yeah, we have seen at times some characters that give some support that are not constantly racing, but we know that they are racers. At the end of the day, that is what they are doing in Trace Academy. Characters like Rice Shower, Manhattan Cafe, or even Gold Ship are never seen as major rivals or even rivals period to the main protagonist, yet all of them are important because they are racers as well. That is not the case of Belno. She is purely supporting the protagonist in everything what she can as a pure friend. From small things such as just helping her buy new shoes to actually help the protagonist to perfect the way that she runs. From just looking like another psychic that might be slightly more helpful than the girls that are back in her old high school, to actually being basically a secondary trainer and even more than that at times. It is insane the level of development that an Uma can have without ever stepping a foot in a race. I mean, she kinda does it, but like it's like a one-time thing and she loses badly, so we don't talk about that. Sorry, Belno. She strategizes with the protagonist, she helps her in several different ways, she even investigates the rivals, something that very rarely is ever done in this series, to a point that I think that is the first time that is showcased in an in-depth way. Which is something that is also gonna happen with another character, but it's insane how much she supports the protagonist. But what is the actual main dish of the secondary characters is undisputably our pretty white lightning, Tamamo Cross. Tamamo Cross is the perfect showcase of what has to be a rival for this series. It doesn't have to be aggressive, it doesn't have to be enemy straight up, it just has to be competitive, and it has to have its own goals, which are always portrayed. We have seen it with other characters in other seasons, mainly Meiji McQueen in the second one and Satono Daimon in the third one. However, this girl goes a step forward and further and showcases what is truly the goals of an actual deuteragonist. I hate that word, I don't know why I use it. She obviously sees the protagonist as our main rival, but that doesn't mean that is its only rival. She is not competing with the protagonist, but rather she is competing to be the best version of herself. And there's different races in which she has different rivals. For example, in the Japan Cup, she is not even competing directly with the protagonist, but rather with another horse that we already mentioned, which is Obey Your Master. By the way, what a fantastic art the Japan Cup is in the way that they showcase the quote-unquote main secondary character as the main protagonist of this arc, and one secondary random character that just appears for that arc as the main secondary, and it does such a fantastic job. Like, it is actually threatening and is actually fantastic to look at. Tamamo Cross showcases so perfectly what is the spirit of actually fighting and not caring about the others but rather about yourself. She does it in a perfect way, and she doesn't need to be like this impossible to beat threat. Like, she is the one to beat for the main protagonist, but that doesn't mean that that is the only thing. Not everyone is perfect, and in something like this show, you know that no one can always win. Unless you're called Agnes Tachyon and you fight it literally only 4 times, or you're called Marzensky and you fight it against donkeys and camels. I'm not trying to insult her, that is just facts. Despite the fact that she's not the main protagonist of the story, she doesn't revolve around the main protagonist at all. I'm not gonna spoil something that happened in the story because it happened like 2 weeks ago in real life time, but she basically decides everything upon herself and never caring about the main protagonist, which showcases you how actually complex she is as a character, and it's expanded even further in the stories that we see about her throughout the second batch of the first season. However, these secondary characters are what makes this a special season, but that doesn't mean that the secondary characters are gonna save the season if the protagonist is not good. It doesn't matter how much you want to try it, Special Week is not helping her season. Then what a stride through to the pretty derby girl. Sorry. But yeah, the thing that actually makes the story is the main protagonist of it. And if you haven't noticed, there is a reason as to why I have not said her name. because I wanted to keep it for a special moment in which we finally mention her for the first time. Because this girl is the one that makes this season special. The Dusty Bunny, the ash color monster, the Cinderella Gray, Oguri Cap. Oguri Cap is by far the most interesting protagonist of the series, even if it's still not my favorite. From the second that you know her, you know that her path has been way tougher than every other protagonist. From Tokaiteyo all the way out to Jungle Poketo, all of them had benefits in the way that they started their careers. Even Special Week didn't suffer almost at all prior to her start as a protagonist. That is not the case of Oguri. From the first episode, we know that her childhood was tough. She has a horrendous condition on her knees, to the point that it was almost a miracle the fact that she can even stand up. And to see a character run like that is such an insane feat that is almost inexplicable. Yet, that is the story of the real life horse. It had terrible knee conditions also in real life, which make it almost impossible for it to actually stand up, and that horse somehow managed to become an actual legend in Japan. It's even more crazy considering that every single one of its descendants were also very poor in the terms of the knee conditions, which makes them, none of them actually useful for horse racing, which makes it even more puzzling the fact that it managed to become such a good racehorse. But not talking about the real life one, we're talking about the anime girl that has so much appetite that she would be able to eat a horse. Yeah, a horse. All of this condition definitely defines what Oguri is throughout the entirety of the show. She is not one that had the things easygoing or even regular. She had the toughest path out of any horse that has ever appeared in this show, and it noticed every single time. Her running style is completely different for the other Umas. She also is not very smart, and she a lot of times has difficult times to actually become friends with others. Yet, that makes her actually the most unique protagonist. She is completely oblivious to so many different things to a point that her comedy is actually pristine and way better than the one of the other main protagonists. I still love you, Taya, but that face is not gonna win against this. Also, the way in which every single one of her races is defined by how she has to overcome her limits, even if in other shows would be cheesy, it feels natural in this one, because that's what she is as a character. She is someone that had to overcome so many difficulties just to even be there, just to even be in a school, let alone be competing in one of the biggest races in all of the world. But definitely what is the strongest point of Oguri Cap is the message of this season. Every single season and every single piece of media of this show has a message that it wants to portray. The first season is trying to be your best. Second season is overcome your weakness. The third one is accept the reality once it's inevitable. And the movie shows that even if the story doesn't want to read your name, if you write your own story, that is bound to happen. But in this case, it's a much bigger message. It's not only overcoming your weakness, it's not only being the best version of yourself, but also the fact that your biggest rival is always yourself. Oguri had to suffer in several different ways, and I'm pretty certain that that is also gonna be the case in the second season that was already announced. But what stayed consistent throughout everything is that all of those weaknesses, she had to overcome them by themselves. Granted, there was always help from her trainers and from Belno Light and from all of her other friends and her rivals motivating her, but at the end of the day, it's you and you alone the one that makes you the person that you are, and the person that pushes you forward the most and the one that slows you down the most is always yourself. And that is the message that Oguri Cap has. She might be a bit of a klutz, she might be dumb, she might even not care about herself enough, but she always pushes herself forward as much as is possible for her. This show has managed to touch my heart in a way that I was not anticipating at all. In what is a little over 50 chapters, it has managed to be so good in so many different ways, portraying several different stories about several different characters and also several different real life stories that is for me actually impossible to comprehend how they managed to do it. I have said so many different things about this show, like how it's a love letter to horse racing, how its portrayal of several different things are among the greatest that you have ever seen. But I think that this season has solidified one thing for me. This show is more than just a horse racing anime. This is more than just a franchise about horse racing. This is more than just a love letter to horse racing. But this is a love letter to sports as a whole. That it doesn't matter what you are looking at. It doesn't matter if it's football. It doesn't matter if it's volleyball. It doesn't matter if it's baseball. All of them have the same goals, and all of them are equal in this regard. That if you show them with the proper love, you can tell some of the greatest stories ever written. And the fact that I have managed to say so many good things about Cinderella Gray without even mentioning once the fact that it has the best animation out of any Spokon that is a regular seasonal anime should speak volumes of the actual quality of everything surrounding this show. And with all of that in mind, I hope that you understand why I said that this show might actually be the best Spokon in this entire decade. And not only that, but also why Uma Musume as a franchise might actually be the best Spokon in modern anime history. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you want more content like this analyzing different shows, please leave a like, comment and subscribe. It not only helps the channel to grow, but it also helps you to make me know that you actually enjoy this type of content and that you actually love horses in a platonic way. And also, if you want more content talking either about seasonal animes, more Spokons, or even different type of content related with Uma Musume, comment down below. I will appreciate it, and I would also like to know the feedback about what do you believe about this type of videos. And well, without anything else to explain, once again, I hope that you enjoyed it and that it was an amazing experience, and see you next time. Bye bye.